Have you ever wondered what it would take to build the perfect soldier? Not just one, but an entire society dedicated to creating the ultimate warrior class. Forget everything you think you know about ancient Greece with its philosophers and artists. Today, we journey south, past the formidable peaks of Mount Taygetus, into a valley that birthed a legend. This is the story of Sparta. Unlike its famous rival Athens, which championed democracy and individual expression, Sparta was forged from a different creed entirely. Its pillars were discipline, obedience, and the complete surrender of the self to the state. In Sparta, the collective was everything. The individual was merely a cog in a great, unrelenting war machine. But how did such an extreme society come to be? Our story begins around the 10th century BCE, a time of myth and migration. A fierce tribe from the north, the Dorians, swept down into the Peloponnesian Peninsula. They conquered the fertile valley of the Eurotas River and subjugated the local population. From this conquest, a rigid, unyielding social structure was born, a pyramid of power that would define Sparta for centuries. At the very top of this pyramid were the Spartiates. These were the elite, the full citizens, the warrior caste. Their lives had one, and only one purpose: to be the finest soldiers the world had ever seen. They were the living embodiment of Spartan ideals. Beneath them were the perioikoi. The name means dwellers around, and that's exactly what they were. They were free people, but not citizens. They lived in the towns surrounding Sparta proper, and handled all the things a Spartiate was forbidden to do: commerce, craftsmanship, and trade. They were the blacksmiths who forged the Spartan swords and the merchants who supplied the city, essential but separate. And at the very bottom, forming the vast base of the pyramid, were the helots. The helots were not just servants. They were a class of state-owned serfs, tied to the land they worked. They were the original inhabitants of the region, conquered and forced to farm the land for their Spartan masters. They outnumbered the Spartiates by a staggering amount, perhaps as much as 10 to 1. This constant, simmering threat of a massive slave revolt haunted the Spartan psyche and justified their brutal, militaristic way of life. The entire system was designed to keep the helots down and the Spartiates ready. For a Spartiate, life was a relentless path of duty. They were strictly forbidden from engaging in any trade, farming, or craft. Such mundane work was considered beneath them. Their hands were meant to hold a spear and a shield, not a tool or a coin. Their entire existence, every single day, was dedicated to honing their skills for war. Every institution in their society, from how they governed to how they raised their families, was engineered to support this singular focus. To maintain this razor-sharp focus and control over such a volatile social structure, Sparta needed an operating system, a code to live by. This came in the form of the Great Retra, a set of laws and principles attributed to a legendary, almost mythical figure named Lycurgus. We don't know for sure if Lycurgus was a real person or a symbol of Sparta's ancient traditions, but the impact of his supposed reforms was absolute. The goal of the Great Retra was breathtakingly ambitious: to engineer the most efficient, loyal, and disciplined military state in history. It was a radical social experiment. Under this code, every aspect of Spartan life was micromanaged by the state. Family, education, government, even personal relationships, everything served the needs of the collective. From the second a Spartan was born to the moment they drew their last breath, they did not belong to themselves. They belonged to Sparta. This state control started at birth. When a Spartan baby was born, it wasn't presented to its parents first. It was brought before a council of elders. These elders would inspect the infant for any sign of weakness or deformity. If the baby was deemed healthy and strong, it was returned to its family to be raised. But if it was considered sickly or imperfect, it was left on a nearby hillside to die. It sounds unbelievably cruel to us, but to the Spartans it was a practical necessity. The state could not afford to waste resources on anyone who couldn't one day contribute to its military strength. If a boy survived this initial inspection, his true test was only just beginning. Until the age of 7, he lived at home with his mother, but his upbringing was far from gentle. Spartan mothers were famous for their tough love, raising their sons not to cry or show fear. They were grooming them for the next most crucial phase of their lives, the agoge. At the age of 7, every Spartan boy was taken from his family and entered into the agoge, a brutal state-sponsored training program that would last for more than a decade. This was the furnace that forged Spartan warriors. They were organized into packs, living in communal barracks. Life in the agoge was intentionally harsh. They were given minimal food, forcing them to learn to forage, to be cunning, and even to steal to survive. If they were caught stealing, they weren't punished for the act itself, but for the clumsiness of getting caught. Discipline was absolute and enforced through constant physical hardship and competition. They were taught to endure pain, cold, and hunger without complaint. They trained barefoot, wore a single cloak year-round, and engaged in vicious team sports that often resembled organized brawls. It was all designed to strip away their individuality and forge an unbreakable bond with their comrades, the men they would one day stand shoulder to shoulder with in the phalanx. Academics were secondary. While they were taught to read and write, it was only enough for practical purposes, like sending messages on the battlefield. The real curriculum was warfare, physical endurance, and unquestioning obedience to authority. Their music was war chants. Their poetry was tales of heroic sacrifice. By the time a young man graduated from the agoge around the age of 20, he was a finely tuned weapon, indoctrinated with the belief that the greatest glory was to die for Sparta. Even after graduating, a Spartan man's life was not his own. He was required to join a syssitia, a common mess hall or dining club of about 15 men. He would eat every evening meal with this group for the rest of his active military career. This wasn't just about food. It was a continuation of the communal bonding from the agoge. These were his brothers in arms, and this shared life reinforced the loyalty and camaraderie essential for the phalanx to hold its line in battle. Marriage was encouraged, but it too was a strange affair by our standards. Men were expected to marry around the age of 30, but they continued to live in the barracks until they retired from active service. They would sneak out at night to visit their wives, a practice meant to keep their passions high and produce healthy children, but also to ensure their primary loyalty remained with their comrades in the barracks, not their family at home. And what about the women of Sparta? While they didn't fight, Spartan women were unlike any others in the ancient Greek world. They were famous for their freedom, confidence, and physical fitness. While Athenian women were confined to the home, Spartan girls also went through their own state-supervised education. They were trained in gymnastics, wrestling, and athletics. The logic was simple. Strong, healthy women would produce strong, healthy sons for the army. They owned and managed property, a rarity in Greece, because their husbands were almost always away with the army. They were educated, outspoken, and deeply patriotic. A famous Spartan saying has a mother handing her son his shield, telling him, "Come back with it or on it. Victory or death." There was no room for cowards. This entire intricate system, the social pyramid, the brutal agoge, the communal living, the empowered women, all of it was designed to sustain one thing: the Spartan phalanx. This military formation, a tight block of hoplite soldiers with interlocking shields and leveled spears, was the pinnacle of ancient warfare, and a Spartan phalanx was the most disciplined and feared of them all. Each warrior protected the man to his left with his shield, creating a moving wall of bronze and iron. Its strength came not from individual heroism, but from collective unity and the absolute trust each man had in his neighbor. This was the society that produced the legendary 300 at Thermopylae, a story that has echoed through millennia as the ultimate symbol of courage against overwhelming odds. But it was a society built on a paradox. To create the ultimate warriors who fought for freedom, Sparta enslaved its own people in a rigid system of control and terrorized its neighbors. It was a state that sacrificed art, philosophy, and personal liberty at the altar of military perfection. The legacy of Sparta is complex. Was it a monstrous totalitarian state or a noble society of heroes? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. It was a unique and extreme experiment in human social engineering, one that prioritized the strength of the state above all else. And while the Spartan way of life eventually faded into history, its legend, a chilling and awe-inspiring tale of discipline, sacrifice, and the pursuit of military perfection, endures. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back to ancient Sparta. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the most incredible chapters of human history. Let us know in the comments what you think about the Spartan way of life. Was it worth the price? We'll see you in the next one.